Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. We're slipping into the worn sandals of a weary but hopeful traveler in ancient Korea. The air is still cool and laced with dew. Roosters have barely started gossiping across thatched rooftops. And you? You're already awake. Sort of. Groggy, maybe. One eye open. You stretch your arms over your head and mentally brace yourself for the day ahead, a much-anticipated outing to the seaside. Not a war, not a royal banquet. Just salt air, sand, and maybe a stolen nap under a willow tree. But don't be fooled, this isn't your modern sunscreen and flip-flops beach day. You're about to pack for a day that involves heavy robes, fermented snacks, and probably a surprise eel. You'll sweat through at least one set of clothes, misplace your mat, and be sandblasted by a rogue gust of sea wind. You'll also make quiet memories, ones with smells and textures, awkward small talk and soft laughs under parasols, that no stone record will preserve. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where, and when, you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stir before the light has even begun to seep through the paper windows. The floor is cold under your toes, and your hands fumble instinctively for the linen satchel by your pillow. This bag isn't fancy, just 2 layers of hand-dyed hemp stitched together by your aunt, but it holds the promise of escape. A break from chores, from your neighbor's endless complaints about radish prices, from the predictable monotony of each sunrise. A cicada clicks outside. Not many yet, it's still early for them. You rise slowly, dressing in silence. If you're from a Yangban family, your sleeves are wide and your inner robe is laid just so. If you're a merchant or farmer's child, it's more practical, thinner, patched in places, but freshly washed in the stream yesterday. You roll up the mat you'll sit on later. It's bamboo, split thin and woven into a surprisingly elegant grid. You curse softly as one splinter nicks your finger. That's part of the ritual now, morning blood offering to the gods of poorly maintained beach accessories. Next, food. The kitchen hearth is dark, but you snag the items packed last night. Your mother left them tied in cloth bundles, rice balls, pickled turnip slices, maybe a square of pressed seaweed if you're lucky. It's not much, but you tell yourself it'll taste better by the water. In the small corner shelf near the door is your folding fan, one of the few indulgences you own. Painted with a scene of cranes flying over pine trees, it's partly chipped from a previous trip, but the sound it makes when flicked open is still satisfying. Like a whisper of elegance. Historians still argue whether seaside day trips were common for all classes or mostly limited to the upper echelons. What's more likely is that your experience depends entirely on where and when you're living in Joseon, Korea. Royal courts may send noble women to the coast for health, salt air supposedly purifies the lungs. Merchants might turn it into a semi-business picnic. You? You're going for pleasure. Or at least the idea of it. You double-check your bag. You've got your fan, your bundle of snacks, the mat, and an extra robe, because there's always that one kid who accidentally pushes someone into the tide pools. You peek out the front gate. It's still dark, but a pale ribbon of light is teasing the horizon. Your cousin is already waiting, satchel slung across one shoulder, chewing on a dried persimmon and looking like he didn't even bother to brush his hair. Typical. The walk to the coast will take an hour, maybe more. You pass paddy fields still soaked from last night's rain, the frogs staging their usual morning opera. At one point, you catch a whiff of something pungent, likely the neighbor's compost pile. You make a mental note not to pack food near soap next time. And then, like magic, the air changes. It's subtle. A lift, a moist softness, a salt-tang breeze that tickles your nose and flutters your sleeves. The coast isn't far now. Somewhere behind you, a cart creaks. A family of potters are heading in the same direction, their baskets piled with lunch boxes and bundles wrapped in indigo cloth. The mother hums a tune about sea dragons and moonlit fish. You hum along quietly. You've heard it before. It's not even 7 a.m., and the sky is already a soft egg blue. You wonder how long you'll stay. Long enough to burn the tops of your ears? Long enough for a nap beneath a pine tree while pretending you're a character in one of your grandfather's folk tales? Probably. Hopefully. The day is just beginning. You arrive at the shore just as the first proper sunbeam breaks free from the hills behind you. The sea isn't roaring, not yet. It breathes, wide and steady, like a big, lazy creature dozing under morning mist. Waves kiss the sand with barely a hiss. You pause and squint toward the horizon. It's difficult to tell where the sea ends and the sky begins, and for a moment, your brain forgets to worry. It's glorious. The beach itself isn't quite the fine, sugary dreamscape you've read about in poetry. It's coarse, studded with small stones and riddled with crab holes, but it's yours for the day. Others are arriving now, figures in cotton hanbok trailing children, their woven hats bobbing like little boats. There's a quiet energy, the kind that comes when people expect absolutely nothing to happen except, maybe joy. You choose your spot near a low, wind-bent tree. It's not exactly shady yet, but it will be later. You unroll your bamboo mat with a practiced flick and sit down cross-legged. The sand squeaks under your weight. You don't mind. One of the first things you unpack is your travel pouch of cosmetics. Not makeup, necessarily, but things to survive a day under sun and wind. A compact of ground mung bean powder, for instance. You pat a little onto your face, it smells faintly earthy, and it's supposed to absorb sweat and prevent redness. Does it work? Hard to say. But you feel more put together with it, so on it goes. Next, your mirror. Not a glass one, those are rare and pricey, but a polished bronze disc you borrowed from your aunt's dressing table. You catch a hazy version of your face, adjust your hair ribbon, and decide you're as seaworthy as you'll ever be. Somewhere behind you, a group of children is attempting to build a sea dragon from driftwood and damp sand. One of them is convinced that sprinkling powdered soybean flour will bring it to life. You watch for a minute. They're using your cousin's hat as the dragon's tail. You pretend not to see. Lunch is still hours away, but people are already talking about it. A woman nearby opens a box of Jorn, pan-fried vegetable pancakes, and their smell floats across the beach like a homing beacon. Another family spreads out containers of jangudji, pickled garlic stems and radish, and boiled eggs dyed with onion skin. It's like a museum of umami. You resist the urge to dig into your own bundle. Instead, you take out your ink brush and a scrap of mulberry paper. Not for schoolwork, don't worry. This is leisure calligraphy, which basically means you write the same character over and over until you either achieve transcendence or run out of ink. Today's word? Calm. Which, ironically, you have to keep muttering under your breath every time the wind folds your paper in half. Historians still argue whether average Joseon-era beachgoers would bring ink and paper on casual trips. Some believe it was a habit reserved for scholars and poets, others say it was common among anyone with basic literacy. Either way, you feel a little smug as you add a dramatic tale to your fourth calm. And then, you notice her. Down the shoreline, a woman in a bright red robe carefully unpacks a wrapped bundle. Not food. Not clothes. It's an umbrella. Not just any umbrella, either. This one is dyed with crushed gardenia and painted with gold cranes. It gleams like a storybook object, absurdly regal for such a breezy setting. People try not to stare. She's probably the daughter of some retired magistrate. Or a secret court performer. Or someone who just really, really likes being fabulous. She stakes her parasol into the sand and begins brushing her hair with a lacquered comb. Your cousin drops his rice bowl in awe. You glance at your own modest cloth hat and sigh. It's fine. You tell yourself that sunburn builds character. Just then, a street performer starts warming up near the dunes. He's young, with a voice like gravel and eyes too big for his face. He juggles 3 stones, badly, and then sings a folk tune about a turtle that falls in love with a carp. No one is quite sure if it's meant to be funny or tragic, but people clap anyway. You do too. It's almost mid-morning now. The sun is climbing, and so is the heat. Your fan is already working overtime, flicking open and shut in a steady rhythm. A boy nearby tries to copy you and accidentally pokes himself in the eye. He recovers quickly, pretending it never happened. You lean back and let your weight sink into the mat. This, right here, is the closest thing to luxury you've had in weeks. The smells, salt, sesame oil, pine sap. The sounds, crickets, laughter, distant waves. You briefly consider writing a haiku, but then remember you're not actually Japanese, and also you have no idea how syllables work. Someone passes by offering barley tea. It's cold, or at least less hot than the air around it, and you accept a cup gratefully. It tastes like roasted comfort. The tide is starting to edge closer. Crabs scurry away from your feet. Your cousin is halfway through a nap already, his mouth open, one hand still holding a sticky rice ball like a toddler clinging to a toy. You pull a corner of your robe over your face to block the sun. Your mind drifts. You wonder what people in the future will think of this day, if they ever find traces of it. A fragment of your mat, a bronze mirror, a faded ink blot on mulberry paper. Will they know how peaceful it was? How ridiculous. How absolutely human? You smile, and the sea keeps breathing. Your cousin snores. Not the cute, bird chirpy kind. This is the full-on dragon growling through a flute kind. You prod him with a toe, and he snorts awake, blinking like he just emerged from a dream about rice cakes and doom. He sits up, confused and chewing. The rice ball is now more rice mush, half glued to his cheek. Meanwhile, the beach has become a theater. Not in the grand, marble column sense, but in that subtle, living way. Everything's in motion. Families shift blankets, children dart between adults, vendors shout half-heartedly, and a dog, you don't know who owns it, runs around in frantic loops with a cabbage leaf in its mouth like it just won a medal. You decide not to question it. It's time to unpack the real supplies now. The ones that make or break your seaside adventure. From your satchel, you draw out a carefully wrapped stack of Jumini, small cloth pouches. Each one smells like home. There's a pouch of dried persimmons, their wrinkled skins sticky with sugar. Another with roasted chestnuts that you cracked open yourself last night, burned your fingertips doing it, too. There's even a little cloth sack with pickled plums swimming in a tart sweet brine so pungent it could wake the dead, or at least your cousin. You wave it under his nose. It works. You divide the snacks with the kind of ceremony usually reserved for moon rituals. Everything gets its tiny plate or leaf, and a few grains fall onto the sand like offerings to the sea. A seagull stares at you from a rock. You stare back. It blinks first. A teenage girl with a fishing spear strolls by and pauses. She eyes your persimmons. You offer her one. In exchange, she hands you a live, wriggling sea cucumber. It's gelatinous. You thank her, because that's what polite people do when handed sentient slime. Your cousin pokes it. The cucumber does not enjoy that. You tuck it into a jar for later. Maybe your aunt will know what to do with it. It's nearly noon, and the tide is crawling closer. Little tide pools are forming now, pockets of life trapped between ridges of sand. You peer into one and spot tiny creatures dancing in the water, translucent shrimp, a crab the size of a fingernail, something that may or may not be a sea ghost. You pretend not to be alarmed. Historians still argue whether everyday Koreans actively explored tidal zones during their beach days. Some evidence suggests only professional foragers or monks ventured into the shallows, but given how curious your cousin is, his already ankle-deep and yelling about finding a sea pickle, you're convinced curiosity was a universal trait. You join him, carefully stepping onto the slippery stones. The water is freezing, which seems deeply unfair given how hot the air is, but your feet adjust. You squat beside a deeper pool, watching a snail leave a delicate trail behind. You scoop up a bit of sand and let it run between your fingers. There's mica in it, tiny glittering flecks that catch the sun and make your hands look like they've been kissed by stars. One of your pouches is for herbs, specifically foraging herbs. Your grandmother insisted you bring it. You pull it out now, checking for watercress, beach greens, anything edible. You're no expert, but you spot a cluster of samphire near the rocks. It crunches when you chew it, salty and green, and you imagine it tossed with sesame oil and a splash of vinegar. Your mouth waters. You pluck a handful and tuck them into your herb pouch, feeling very accomplished. Your cousin, meanwhile, is building a moat around a crab. He claims it's a palace. You don't have the heart to tell him it's more of a prison. Back at your mat, your belongings have somehow tripled in size. The wind has shifted, lifting your hat and depositing it 2 meters away, now worn proudly by a local child as a makeshift turtle shell. You retrieve it with minimal negotiation, trading a piece of chestnut for its safe return. The woman with the golden crane parasol is reading now. Not a scroll, an actual book, hand-bound with indigo-dyed covers and red thread. You catch a glimpse of the title, The Cloud Pavilion. Poetry, probably. Or a romance. Her expression doesn't shift, but her eyes flick faster across the page than any ocean wave. Inspired, you decide to recite a poem. You stand, clear your throat dramatically, and begin. Sea wind. You tousle my robe. Again. Your cousin applauds. A nearby toddler claps too, though he might be doing it out of rhythm. The seagull looks unimpressed. You sit again and sip the last of your barley tea. It's warm now, but still comforting. You add a little pebble to your pouch, a habit you picked up from your uncle who claims beach pebbles absorb memory. You don't know if it's true, but the idea feels delicious. A boy walks by carrying a wooden tray of medicinal drinks, ginseng decoctions, probably fermented bean broth, even a bottle of honeyed water thick as syrup. You buy the cheapest one, which tastes like moss and regret. Your cousin likes it. Of course he does. The shadows are shifting, and someone starts a song. It's an old tune about two lovers separated by a river, reunited only when their shadows meet on the water. The beach goes quiet. Even the birds seem to hush for a verse. The song ends on a lingering note, like a door left ajar. You press your hands into the sand behind you, leaning back, looking up at the sky. The clouds are wispy now, like rice paper torn into strips. Somewhere out there, a storm is probably forming. But here, in this moment, everything is still. You run your finger along the edge of your bamboo mat, a little groove carved by time and use. You think about how many feet have crossed this shoreline, how many people have laughed, cried, kissed, or napped in the exact spot you're sitting. Your cousin lies back down, sighs like an old man, and mutters something about boiled eggs. You smile. Lunch is almost here. The sun climbs higher, blazing now like a judgmental aunt during harvest festival, unforgiving and impossible to ignore. You squint up at it through your hat's brim, which sags slightly, still damp from its brief journey as a child's turtle shell. Beside you, your cousin is already horizontal again, this time mumbling about fish cakes in his sleep. But your thoughts are occupied with lunch. Ancient Koreans didn't go to the seaside empty-stomached, and they certainly didn't rely on beach vendors slinging squid on a stick, not yet, anyway. You reach into the largest of your woven lunch bundles, carefully unwrapping the lacquered box packed just that morning. It's warm from the sun, and it smells divine. You lift the lid. There's steamed barley rice, still slightly sticky and golden from toasted sesame oil. It's pressed into a neat square, topped with pickled radish slices shaped like flower petals. A small side dish of stir-fried anchovies glistens beside a pile of seasoned spinach, wilted just enough to be tender but still proud. There's even a rolled egg omelette tucked into a corner, striped with green onion. This was your mother's doing. She always over-prepares. You suspect if the tide turned and the world ended in a briny apocalypse, her lunchbox would still have enough calories to carry your family into the next dynasty. And what's lunch without soup? You open the clay jar she packed separately, tied with a waxed cloth lid and sealed with a loop of string. The smell wafts upward, earthy, fermented soybean paste with ribbons of seaweed and slivers of tofu floating like soft clouds. Doenjangguk. You pour it carefully into a wooden bowl, using a spoon carved from pine that tastes just faintly like the forest it came from. It's not all yours, of course. Your cousin's eyes snap open the moment the soup scent hits his nose. He sits up like he's been summoned by a shamanic bell, grabs his share without ceremony, and devours it with a vigor reserved for tax collectors and seagull chasers. You eat slower, savoring. The crunch of radish, the salty sweet kick of anchovy, the warm softness of the barley, each bite is a comfort hymn. Historians agree that meals were a central part of day trips like this, even in the early Three Kingdoms period. Portable feasts weren't just about sustenance, they were about pride, status, and showing off just how much pickled daikon one family could carry. And yes, even back then, there were those families who packed elaborate lotus-shaped rice cakes just to make the neighbors jealous. You're not jealous. You're just observationally competitive. A family 3 mats down is unpacking a meal that includes octopus tentacles curled around sticks of pine, dried stingray strips dipped in honey, and what might be eel eggs wrapped in perilla leaves. A boy from that group walks by and offers you a square of honey rice cake. You accept, and offer him some spinach. It's how alliances were formed back then. Well, food and the occasional arranged marriage. Halfway through your meal, a buzzing sound drifts toward you. Bees? No. A reed flute. Someone's playing a tune from further down the beach, a wandering musician or maybe just an uncle who took a few music lessons and refuses to let it go. The melody weaves through the salt air like smoke. You finish eating and wipe your fingers on a cloth dampened with lavender water. Your mother packed that, too. She thinks you smell like outside when left unattended. Your cousin burps, then pretends to fall over dead from fullness. You toss a pebble at him. He groans dramatically. The pebble misses and hits a crab instead. The crab doesn't flinch. Crabs are built different. Now comes the cleanup dance. No trash left behind. Even in ancient times, people were mindful of waste, especially food. Wrappings are folded, bits of leftover rice brushed back into boxes, and even soup dregs are poured out respectfully near the tide, where the sea can reclaim what it gave. You rinse your fingers in a tide pool and watch tiny fish scatter. The water is cooler now, the breeze picking up. Afternoon is arriving, and with it, the magical window between rest and activity. The beach stretches out like a lazy dog, dozing in the sun, tail twitching, waiting to spring into play. A merchant passes by, jingling with trinkets, hairpins carved from antler, clay figurines of tigers and turtles, beaded bracelets that supposedly ward off nightmares. You pick up one shaped like a smiling moon and hand over 2 copper coins. It's probably overpriced. You don't care. It glints prettily on your wrist. You and your cousin lie back again. Food coma in full swing. You talk nonsense for a while. About whether clouds are solid. About whether the ocean has a taste memory. About how many pickled plums it would take to sink a boat. The usual lunchtime philosophy. Then the nap happens. It's not planned. It creeps up like a thief. You feel your eyes slipping shut. The breeze brushes over your skin like a lullaby. Your cousin's breathing slows. Someone is drumming softly far off, a dull rhythmic heartbeat echoing through the sand. There's a lull in the world. Scholars still debate whether naps were intentional during seaside outings or simply a side effect of too much rice. Some writings hint that midday rests were considered a mark of refined living, while others frame them as peasant necessity, resting during the hottest hours before labor resumed. Either way, you're not complaining. You're drifting. The sand is warm beneath your spine, shaped perfectly to your back. You feel the weight of your full belly, the pulse in your fingers, the sun pressing gently on your closed lids. In this moment, your biggest worry is whether the wind will knock your hat off again. And honestly, that's more than enough. The nap doesn't last forever. Nothing ever does, not even in ancient Korea on a beach that seems carved from some sleepy dream of perfection. You wake with a soft grunt, the kind that surprises even yourself, and wipe a line of drool from your chin. Your cousin's already up, poking at a tide pool with a stick, arguing with a small crab that refuses to be poked. It's time for the next part of the day. You roll onto your side and stretch, joints popping in quiet rebellion. The afternoon heat has shifted. There's a mildness to the air now, like the world's cooled a few degrees and exhaled a long sigh. This is the perfect time for beach games. Not the kind with plastic buckets or rubber balls, mind you, those won't be invented for centuries. No, this is when you reach into the second bundle and pull out a worn cloth sack filled with treasures. Flat stones for skipping, carved sticks for flicking, knuckle bones for tossing. Yes, knuckle bones, actual ones, cleaned and polished, usually from sheep or goats. In a pinch, you've even used painted ceramic ones. The game is called gongi now, but back then it had other names depending on your region, some sounding poetic, others more like someone sneezed mid-sentence. Whatever it's called, it's simple enough. Toss one bone in the air and scoop up others before it lands. Think ancient hand-eye coordination challenge, meets proto-juggling, meets humble brag opportunity. You're good at it. Your cousin, not so much. The two of you sit on a woven mat, legs crossed, and begin the match. The bones clatter like tiny drums on the wood surface of your boxlit playing field. You win 3 rounds before he insists on switching to stone flicking, another favorite. You arrange flat pebbles in a ring and try to knock one out with a single flick. There's no real prize, unless pride counts. And maybe it does, since your cousin refuses to stop until he wins at least once. He doesn't. Nearby, other beachgoers are engaged in their own amusements. A group of younger kids is playing tug-of-war with a vine, shrieking as one side collapses in the sand. A few teenagers are daring each other to run into the waves and scream "Sea Ghost" as they splash out again. One brave soul is performing acrobatics, handstands and cartwheels in the sand, shirtless and smug. Entertainment wasn't passive in those days. Without screens or even books for leisure, you had to move, to compete, to laugh loudly and get dirty. Play was physical, communal, deeply tied to seasons and surroundings. And while elite families had indoor board games with fancy jade counters, most folks relied on nature and quick reflexes. A dog runs by, not yours, but you greet it like an old friend anyway. It stops just long enough for a scratch behind the ears and a moment of deep eye contact that says, "I would absolutely steal your rice cakes if you looked away." Your cousin throws a bone for it. The dog chases it and immediately decides it's unworthy. Then comes the kite. Someone a few mats down is pulling a folded frame from their bundle. Its paper stretched tight over a bamboo skeleton, painted with a tiger leaping toward a red sun. You feel a flicker of envy. Yours isn't quite so majestic, just a fish, bold and blue, with googly eyes drawn in soot. You dig it out anyway, attach the string, and hand it to your cousin while you scan for wind. "Up the hill," he suggests. So you go. You climb a sandy slope toward the edge of the beach where grass overtakes salt, and children's laughter fades behind you. You run into the breeze, unspooling string, feeling the tug grow stronger, like the sky wants your fish as much as you do. And then, yes, it lifts. The fish dances, tail fluttering, eyes wide with the thrill of altitude. You let out a triumphant whoop. Your cousin cheers too, though he secretly still prefers the crab. Kites, or yun, were already a common sight in ancient Korea. Originally used for military signaling, yes, some poor messenger had to hope the general noticed his red kite flapping retreat, they later became toys and festival icons. Some were enormous and shaped like dragons, others were tiny, simple, but still carried joy like a prayer on the wind. There's a legend that during the guerrilla period, a child flew a kite carrying a secret message across enemy lines. Historians still argue whether this is fact or folk embellishment, but it makes for a great story, especially when you're holding the string and pretending your fish has a secret mission too. After a while, the wind shifts and your fish dips, loops, and nosedives. Your cousin catches it before it buries itself in a bush. You high-five without calling it that because, well, it's the past. You probably just nod in triumph and say something like, "Good kite spirit." You trudge back down the hill, flushed with sun and victory. A pot of barley tea has been warming beside someone's fire. You pour a little into your wooden cup, bitter and earthy, just what you need. A merchant offers to trade you a wooden whistle in the shape of a turtle for your lucky shell bracelet. You decline. The bracelet has too much of the day soaked into it now. The games wind down. The sun dips lower. Long shadows stretch like lazy cats over the beach. The air smells faintly of smoke and brine. Far off, someone is heating up more food. You feel a growl in your stomach but know the big meal will come later. For now, the play was enough. You sit back down beside your cousin. The tide has rolled a little closer. The crab is gone. The bones are tucked away. The fish kite rests beside you, slightly torn but proud. You look up at the sky, now streaked with the first hints of pink. And for a moment, you think, this might be the best kind of day there is. The sky is dipping into that particular shade of late afternoon gold, the one that makes everything look like it belongs in a scroll painting. Your cousin hums an old fishing song, low and off-key, while tracing shapes in the sand with a stick. You stretch your legs and stare at the waves, listening to their rhythm like it's the beach's own sleepy lullaby. But your stomach interrupts. Right on cue, a low rumble rolls through your gut like thunder announcing dinner time. You glance at your cousin, whose eyes have suddenly locked on the bundles you've kept stashed beneath a beach parasol made of woven reeds. It's time for the afternoon meal, lighter than the morning feast, but still nothing short of a seaside celebration. Out comes the second layer of wrapped cloths, meticulously folded and secured with little bone pins. You untie them like secrets, because, honestly, what's better than food wrapped in layers? It's like unwrapping a gift where the gift is salted, fermented, or stuffed with chestnuts. The centerpiece today, a stack of flat, golden brown jawn pancakes. Some made with mung bean, others flecked with wild chives. You pull apart one and hand it to your cousin, steam still whispering from the middle. He burns his tongue in the name of enthusiasm. Worth it. Nearby, a neighboring family has laid out their own offerings, slices of dried fish brushed with honey glaze, spicy radish pickles, and even skewered eel, charred just right. You exchange polite glances and, with a smile, trade a few pancakes for a handful of pine nut-studded rice balls. This is how it worked back then. Food flowed between families like stories. Not a potluck, not quite a barter system, more a gentle agreement that nobody should eat alone when there's sunlight to share. Your personal favorite, though? The yakwa, tiny honey cookies, flower-shaped and fried to a delicate crispness. They're chewy, sweet, and mildly suspicious in quantity. You might have packed a dozen. There are 5 left. Your cousin denies everything with sticky fingers. While you eat, someone starts plucking at a 2-stringed hegium. The sound is thin, wavering, almost like a voice lost in the wind, but it's beautiful in that distant, haunting way. Music, in ancient Korea, was less about background ambience and more about mood shaping. It told stories, soothed tempers, even helped digestion, probably. Okay, not confirmed, but you're willing to believe anything while chewing honeyed pastry. There's a fringe belief, whispered around fires during certain festivals, that particular musical notes could summon sea spirits. Historians still argue whether this is religious symbolism or just wishful thinking from fishermen who couldn't explain why their nets came up full after someone started humming. Either way, you hum along with the tune, just in case. You're full now. Not the uncomfortable kind of full, but the cozy kind. Like your belly has become a warm stone nestled in a patch of sun. You lie back, arms behind your head, while your cousin collects seashells in a folded paper pouch made from discarded scroll scraps. He claims he's making a gift for his crush back in the village. You don't have the heart to tell him half the shells have holes or smell faintly of dead snail. Nearby, a group of elders is gathered in a slow circle, sipping on fermented plum tea from ceramic cups and sharing old proverbs. One of them, a wiry man with a beard like tangled rope, says something that makes the others cackle. You catch only a bit of it, something about never trust a fisherman who doesn't swim. HM noted. You shift your gaze to the horizon. Boats drift far out on the water, some simple dugouts, others with patched sails like broken wings. From this distance, they look like lazy bugs skating across a blue glass plate. Fishing has already been done for the day, nets drying like giant spider webs between wooden stakes. You consider walking down the shore to peek at the catch, but your limbs vote no, firmly and unanimously. The scent of fermented soybean paste wafts over from another mat. Someone's cooking again, likely doenjang jigigi, a hearty stew made portable with clever jars and reheated on clay pans. You'd think the salt air would overwhelm the aroma, but no, it blends like an extra seasoning. You briefly mourn your own lack of stew. Your cousin offers half a rice ball in sympathy. You accept it like it's a royal decree. As the shadows stretch longer, you begin noticing who's left the beach. Some families are already packing up. Cloths are folded, pots scraped clean, and children corralled like wild goats. But you? You're not quite ready yet. You reach for your small mirror, polished bronze, oval-shaped, cool to the touch. Not for vanity, necessarily. Mirrors back then were thought to repel evil spirits. Not to mention, they made decent signaling tools if you flashed them just right. You angle it toward the sea and catch a spark of sunlight. Your cousin squints and pretends to die dramatically. You give yourself a half smile in the reflection. Just enough light left to enjoy. Then comes the hawker. You hear him before you see him, a rhythmic call carried on the breeze. He's a traveling vendor with a shoulder yoke, two hanging baskets swinging like sleepy cradles. One holds small toys carved from driftwood, tops, spinning coins, tiny whistles. The other? Candid jujubes. You already know which side you're interested in. You rummage through your satchel for your trade goods, a folded length of dyed cloth, some spare fishing hooks, and 2 fish bones carved into earrings. The hawker eyes the lot, plucks the cloth, and hands you a stick of sticky red fruit, glistening like it's been dipped in dreams. It tastes of sugar and wind. Trade in ancient Korea was more than economics. It was story swapping, relationship building, a trust exercise wrapped in practicality. In smaller coastal villages, barter dominated. Coins existed, yes, but rarely jingled here on the beach. Here, it was about what you had, and what you could part with. Your cloth may have been part of your mother's wedding robe. The jujube might have been simmered in a mountain spring. Value danced between memory and need. The sun is a deep orange coin on the horizon now. Soon it'll slip below the waves and take the heat with it. You finish your fruit, lick the sugar from your fingers, and glance over at your cousin. He's fast asleep in the sand, the paper shell pouch still clutched in one hand. His mouth is open just enough for a fly to consider exploring. You smile, shake your head, and let yourself lie back one more time. This was the perfect afternoon. You wake to the subtle sound of waves lapping higher on the shore. The breeze has shifted, and with it comes the faint scent of damp wood, brine, and something vaguely fishy, less charming than earlier, but entirely expected. The sun has just slipped beneath the ocean, casting the world in a cool, blue shadow. You stretch and realize you dozed off for a bit. Your cousin is still out cold, using a bundle of seaweed as a pillow. Not ideal, but youth is forgiving. Now comes the quiet bustle of the twilight hour, the time when beachgoers start turning from leisure to logistics. You sit up and take inventory. Mats rolled? Check. Leftover pancakes secured? Mostly. Someone ate the last yakwa, and you have your suspicions. Trinkets packed? Shell pouch intact. Your cousin mumbles something about a dragon and rolls over. This is when you shift into a very specific seaside mode, packing, but not quite leaving. Not yet. Instead, you're prepping for the night fire, the low, crackling heart of every beach day worth remembering. You and a few other families gather driftwood and dried brush, stacking it into a cone with the casual confidence of people who've done this dozens of times. One older man carries embers wrapped in thick ceramic, still warm from his home hearth that morning. He kneels, blows gently, and soon the fire catches with a small whoosh. Sparks scatter like fireflies in retreat. As flames rise, so do the stories. One woman starts spinning a tale about a tiger that fell in love with a goose. It's ridiculous, but delivered with such dramatic pauses and wild gestures that the kids are hooked. You lean in too. Something about magical feathers and a talking mountain. You don't need it to make sense. You just need the fire's warmth and the sound of your cousin snoring behind you. This is how history lived before books took over, through tales told under stars, layered with meaning, mistranslation, and moonlight. Historians still argue whether some of these oral stories date back to the Three Kingdoms period or if they're more recent embellishments layered over time. Either way, they've outlived wars, kings, and several regional cooking trends. As you roast skewered rice cakes over the flames, chewy and lightly crisp on the outside, you overhear a quiet debate between two older teens. They're arguing whether it's better to swim during the high tide at night or wait for dawn. One claims the moonlight makes the sea spirits sleepy and less likely to pull you under. The other just rolls their eyes and pokes the fire harder than necessary. And now you're wondering, do you believe in sea spirits? Your grandmother once told you about the heathen, gods of the sea that controlled tides, moods, and sometimes even love lives. Fishermen would leave offerings, bundles of rice, shiny coins, fermented wine. One guy supposedly threw in a ring and got back a talking fish. Nobody believes that last part. Except your grandmother. And possibly the guy. You rise and take a slow walk toward the shore, careful not to trip over the bundled fishing nets or children digging one last tunnel to nowhere. The waves glow faintly, phosphorescence, they call it. Tiny plankton lighting up with every swell, like the sea is holding its own firefly festival just beneath the surface. You dip your toes in. It's colder now, but not unfriendly. Someone further down is sketching patterns in the wet sand with a stick. Spiral after spiral, dot after dot. You recognize it, an old pattern set to honor the god of wind. Meant to confuse evil spirits and lead them away from camps. Fringe belief? Maybe. But then again, you just burned your tongue on a ghost story and liked it. Behind you, the fire is a circle of orange and red, reflecting off every pot, plate, and set of tired cheeks. You head back and find a spot beside your cousin, who's finally awake and chewing on something suspicious. It might be a leftover jujube. You decide not to ask. Now comes the lanterns. Each family lights their own, paper wrapped around thin wooden frames, flame nestled deep inside. Some are round, some shaped like lotus flowers or carp. Yours is simple, square, pale yellow, with one side decorated in blue ink. It shows a mountain. A real one, supposedly. You don't remember which. Your cousin says it's the one he plans to climb when he becomes a scholar warrior poet fisherman. Lofty goals, but you nod like it's already true. You carry your lantern to the water's edge and set it afloat. This is not a solemn ritual, not exactly. It's a tradition layered with meaning but delivered gently. Some say it sends wishes to the spirits. Others say it guides lost ancestors back to shore. A few claim it's just to look pretty. One uncle, tipsy from too much plum wine, insists it's for the sea turtles. You wave to a turtle anyway. Just in case. Watching the lantern drift, you feel something unusual, stillness. Not the absence of sound, there are still kids laughing, fires popping, and someone sneezing dramatically, but the rare moment when everything feels in place. Like time itself has curled up beside the fire and nodded off. You spot an old woman holding a fan painted with cranes. She's humming an old song about the moon. You catch the melody, then the words, soft and weathered. It's a lullaby, one your mother used to sing when you had a fever and couldn't sleep. You mouth along, barely breathing the lyrics, like they might shatter if spoken too loud. Then your cousin breaks the mood by hiccuping and knocking over a jar of pickled garlic. As everyone settles in, some lie down under reed mats or thin blankets. The smarter ones brought pillows. You, of course, are not among them. You bunch up your rolled tunic and call it rustic comfort. A nearby child has curled up beside her grandmother, both under the same faded quilt stitched with cranes and clouds. Someone hands out one last round of sweet rice puffs. You take one and pretend it's medicinal. For warmth. For dreams. For not being grumpy in the morning. You close your eyes. Around you, fires fade to embers, and lanterns flicker their final glows before being swallowed by the sea. The stars are bright tonight, like someone polished them just for this view. You let yourself drift, not fully asleep, not quite awake. Just floating between firelight and ocean hush. Tomorrow, you'll leave. The walk home will be sandy and long. Your cousin will complain. You'll forget to pack something. A sandal, probably. But for now, in this quiet stretch of time, you're just here, warm, full, and wrapped in stories. You wake with a mouthful of sand and the vague feeling that a clam may have judged your snoring. Morning has crept in like a shy cat, lightly, tentatively, casting soft gold over the beach. The fire is now just a circle of ash and glowing coals. Someone's poking at it with a stick, half-heartedly, like they're trying to make it feel useful again. Your back aches. Of course it does. You slept on a packed mat of grass over sand, using your rolled-up outer robe as a pillow. One could argue it's character building. One would be lying. Next to you, your cousin is wrapped like a rice roll in a blanket, his face buried in a pillow he borrowed from a neighbor's cart. You briefly consider waking him up with a splash of seawater, but decide against it, mostly because you don't want to get wet yourself. The air is cool, almost crisp, and your breath puffs lightly as you exhale. Not exactly cold, but enough to make you pull your tunic tighter and shuffle over to the remnants of the fire. Someone hands you a warm drink, barely sweet barley tea in a clay cup. You sip, and your body finally starts remembering how to function. It's time to break down camp. Seaside trips weren't all fun and fish cakes. Packing up was its own form of controlled chaos. And for ancient Koreans, it wasn't just about gathering items, it was a ritual in itself, full of unspoken rules, passive-aggressive muttering, and minor philosophical crises like did we pack too much? Yes. Or where's the lacquered bowl with the turtle on it? Under the fish basket. Obviously. The mats are first. Carefully rolled, then beaten clean with bamboo paddles to shake off the sand, bugs, and possibly your dignity. You help your aunt fold up the multicolored woven mat that had served as your family's base camp. Each fold is precise, corners aligned like it's a sacred scroll. Honestly, she might take it more seriously than actual scrolls. Next comes the food gear. Ceramic pots are emptied, rinsed in seawater, and packed with thick straw padding to avoid chips on the bumpy road home. You spot the jar of leftover pickled garlic that nearly ended last night's lantern ceremony, amazingly, intact. You wrap it tightly and bury it at the bottom of a basket. No one needs to relive that drama. Then there's the issue of all the sea souvenirs. Every child, and, let's be honest, at least one adult, has collected an unreasonable number of shells, rocks, and suspiciously shiny things that may or may not be fish bones. These are now being debated like rare artifacts. One kid insists a green pebble is sacred. Another is trying to trade her sand dollar for a bronze hairpin. Economies rise and fall before breakfast. You repack your own finds, 4 smooth black stones, a fan-shaped shell, and what you sincerely hope is not fossilized fish poop. It's beautiful. You keep it. The folding screens are next. Lightweight, lacquered, and painted with mountains and cranes, these little privacy barriers were not just decorative, they shielded against wind and gave families a sense of personal space in a very public picnic. Collapsing them is a team effort involving quiet curses and the occasional pinched finger. Then the tents. If your family was fancy, or had elderly relatives, they might have brought a small tent-like structure made of bamboo frames and lead textiles. Yours, predictably, brought the budget breezy option, a single woven canopy strung between driftwood poles. It worked, mostly. Now, it's being tugged down while 3 people argue whether it was originally tied with rope or someone's sash. Spoiler, it was the sash. Historians still argue whether such seaside outings were regular, seasonal events for average families or reserved for wealthier classes with leisure time. Archaeological finds, like beachside pottery shards, bronze hairpins, and even ancient fish grill remnants, suggest it wasn't entirely exclusive. But the full picture remains grainy. Much like your knees. Someone nearby is having a footwear crisis. A teenage boy is claiming he packed his Seaside leather sandals with decorative stitching, but now he's stuck with his aunt's. They're pink. With floral cutouts. And 2 sizes too small. Everyone is being very supportive. By which we mean, they are laughing. Loudly. You glance at your own sandals. One's fine. The other has been partially digested by the fire's outer edge. You try not to take it personally. Instead, you double-wrap the damaged foot with cloth strips torn from your cousin's adventure tunic. He'll never notice. Or if he does, he'll forget by lunch. Now, you begin loading the carts. Pulled by oxen or sturdy mountain ponies, these wooden carts are the unsung heroes of Korean travel life. Covered with hemp cloth to guard against sun and sea spray, they're slowly being filled. Baskets first, then wrapped pots, then foldables like mats and screens. Live items go last. You have 2, a jar of still flopping minnows caught the night before, and a very angry crab someone tried to keep as a pet. He's now a team mascot. You name him Claw-san. Some families walk. Others ride. A few lucky elders get palanquins, small, boxy chairs carried by 4 strong people who will undoubtedly complain about it the entire way. You, naturally, will be walking. Sand in your hair. Robes smelling like campfire and pickled plum. And your cousin dragging his feet while holding the crab jar like it's a crown jewel. There's always a final moment, right before leaving, when someone insists on just one more look. You do it too. You step back onto the emptying beach, gaze at the now lonely driftwood fire pit, the dark wet line where tide meets land, and the slow bob of one remaining lantern that didn't quite make it to the open sea. You breathe it all in. The salty air. the echo of waves. The weight of your bag digging into your shoulder. You'll forget some parts of today, the arguments, the sore feet, but others will stay. The hum of that lullaby. The warm cup of barley tea. The way the lantern floated just a little longer than it should have. And now it's time to go. You join the procession of carts, sandals, and sleepy complaints winding back toward the inland paths. The sun's risen high enough to warm your face. Somewhere ahead, someone's already planning the next trip. But for now, all you have to do is walk. You don't get far before someone remembers they left the fish grill behind. Of course they did. A panicked nephew sprints back to the shore, robes flapping like a startled kite. You wait with your fellow travelers, trying not to look too smug. You knew someone would forget something. That's practically a tradition at this point. Maybe not enshrined in the annals of the Joseon dynasty, but it should be. Once the grill is recovered, singed but salvageable, the caravan officially begins its homeward march. But the journey's not just a return trip. For many ancient Korean families, the trek back from the seaside was just as important as the trip out. It was a time to reflect, to process, and, perhaps most critically, to snack. Your aunt cracks open the first basket about 20 minutes in. Out comes a cloth-wrapped bundle of teak, rice cakes glutinous enough to glue your molars together. These are mugwort-flavored, dyed green from herbs picked back at the village. Some are stamped with floral patterns using wooden presses, the kind passed down from grandmother to mother to mildly annoyed daughter-in-law. You chew thoughtfully, feet crunching over a gravel path winding through low hills. The oxen plod forward with resigned wisdom. They've done this route more times than your ancestors can count. As the road curves inland, you pass small village outposts, clusters of thatched roof huts, smoke rising lazily from kitchen chimneys. A group of local children run out to wave, giggling at the sight of your crab mascot, who's now sulking in a ceramic pot with a leaf umbrella for shade. He looks like an exiled minister, your cousin mutters, and you snort barley tea out your nose. Some villagers eye your group with mild suspicion. After all, you're loud, disheveled, and possibly carrying more shells than one community needs. But others greet you with polite bows, exchanging news or gossip from the shore. Apparently, another family lost their soup pot to a particularly bold raccoon dog last night. Tragic. Hilarious. Probably preventable. You pass rice paddies shimmering under the mid-morning sun, dragonflies skimming the surface like they are late for an appointment. Every now and then, someone stops to tighten a sandal strap or adjust a basket load. And always, the conversations bubble, quietly, intimately, like smoke through thatched walls. One old uncle starts a story about the Hinyo, those legendary women divers from Jeju Island, who dive without oxygen tanks, braving cold and danger to gather shellfish and seaweed. You've heard of them, though your family's from the mainland. They don't fear the sea, he says, half whispering. They belong to it. Historians still debate how far back the tradition of Hinyo really goes. Some suggest traces as early as the 5th century, others believe it took fuller shape in the 17th or 18th centuries. But their spirit, resilient, salt-stung, and utterly unbothered by the male ego, certainly echoes even in these mainland gatherings. You half wish you'd seen one at the shore, just once. By midday, the group finds a shaded clearing for a rest. The canopy of ginkgo and chestnut trees dapples the ground with golden light, like coins spilled from a lazy god's pouch. You flop down on a mat, grateful for even 5 minutes off your aching legs. Lunch is modest but comforting, sticky rice bowls with pickled radish tucked inside, dried fish strips with a sweet and spicy glaze, and slices of steamed egg rolled around spring onions. A clay jug of plum vinegar is passed around like sacred treasure. It stings your throat and perks up your soul. Nearby, a grandmother pulls out a fabric pouch filled with dried kelp and tiny salted shrimp. She hands you a strip of seaweed. You chew slowly, briny flavors waking up a different part of your tongue. Good for your blood, she says, patting your back like you're a slightly confused goat. Someone breaks out a small hand drum, more toy than instrument, and starts tapping a rhythm. Children dance. Adults pretend not to watch. Even the oxen seem mildly entertained. You lie back, staring at the blue patch of sky between branches. It's quiet, in that way that's full of life rather than empty of it. You feel the exhaustion settling into your bones, not heavy, but satisfying, like a good soak or a long cry. You could sleep right here. You might. But the journey presses on. As the group regathers, you're tasked with helping pack up. Again. Because you're young and full of energy, according to your aunt. That is a lie. You are 95% noodle at this point. Still, you fold the mat, secure the baskets, and make sure Clawsang the crab is still alive. He is. And has given you side eye. Back on the road, the conversation drifts toward what people plan to do with their seaside spoils. One uncle is already talking about pickling fish. A cousin wants to sketch the beach from memory using ink and mulberry paper. Your mother's debating whether to carve a spoon from that driftwood piece you swiped. You're considering a short poem. Something about wind and waves and questionable fire safety. Or maybe just a long nap. You pass a small roadside shrine, a simple stone figure wearing a mossy cap, offerings of rice cakes and coins placed at its feet. Some whisper a quick prayer. Others just bow silently. You follow suit, not entirely sure what the shrine guards. Safe passage? Good harvest? Protection from irritable crabs? Doesn't matter. The gesture feels right. By late afternoon, the shadows stretch long and thin. You round a bend and see the rooftops of your village in the distance. Smoke curls up, dogs bark lazily, and the smell of boiling millet wafts on the breeze. You're almost home. You feel it in your feet, your shoulders, even your soul. That shift. That easing. Your journey is nearly done. The village greets you not with fanfare, but with something quieter and deeper, recognition. You step onto familiar stone paths, worn smooth by decades of sandals and ox hooves, and feel the invisible tether that ties you here tighten. Home isn't loud. It's just known. Your neighbor's rooster crows with self-importance as you pass, as if announcing your return personally. You're not sure if it's welcome or mockery. Probably both. He always did have attitude. As the caravan shuffles in, people start peeling off, pebbled goodbyes, promises to trade stories later, small waves exchange like paper fans. The air is still thick with sea salt memory, but already daily life begins to reclaim its rhythm. You lug your basket toward your family's courtyard, stepping through the wooden gate just as your younger sibling rushes out to greet you, eyes wide. Did you see a sea ghost? They ask immediately. You grin. Was. A sea uncle. He had opinions. Inside, the house feels somehow smaller than when you left it. Or maybe you've just expanded. Your skin holds sunlight. Your hair still smells like tide. Even your sandals seem too worldly now, like they've walked across dynasties. First things first, unpacking. The family spreads out mats in the courtyard, and soon, it looks like a small seaside marketplace exploded. Shells, dried fish, wet rope, seaweed bundles, and sand, so much sand, spill across the cloths. You carefully extract Clawsang the crab from his ceramic transport pot. He blinks at you with all the grace of an overworked official. You set him gently in a basin and drop in a bit of leftover kelp. He eats like he's filing a complaint. Your grandmother starts sorting the day's treasures. Her fingers move with precision, inspecting dried mollusks for signs of rot, laying out salt-stiffened netting to dry, and tapping a gourd filled with brine to test the seal. She doesn't say much, but every glance is a lesson. And if you listen long enough, even her silence hums. One mainstream historical fact that sneaks in here: in many coastal regions of ancient Korea, especially during the Goryeo and early Joseon periods, certain families were known for their preservation techniques, methods of drying, fermenting, and salting seafood that allowed these seaside spoils to feed entire villages for weeks or months. The knowledge passed through matriarchal lines, often never written down. Your grandmother, it seems, is one of those quiet gatekeepers. You help rinse some of the seaweed bundles, your fingers going numb in the cool water. The algae unfurls like dragon tongues, green and slippery. You'll hang them on bamboo poles tomorrow, sun-dry them into crispy snack form. Or maybe ferment them with chili for that sour spicy punch. But it's not all practical. You pocket one particularly round, smooth stone, sea-worn and perfect. You'll paint a face on it later. Maybe Clawsang's. Maybe your own, if you're feeling dramatic. Inside the house, your mother's already prepping dinner with whatever didn't melt in the heat. Bits of grilled fish are tossed with sesame oil and wild spring onions. That leftover sea urchin you thought was suspicious? Turns out, it makes a surprisingly decent broth. You sit at the low table, brushing flecks of salt off your sleeves, as the first pot begins to boil. This pot, the communal return meal, isn't fancy, but it's sacred. The laughter, the swapping of exaggerated stories, the squid was this big, and the silent glances across the table say more than any temple inscription ever could. A quirky detail slips in. Your uncle, who has been suspiciously quiet, suddenly produces a pouch of sea coins he found. Except they're not coins, they're just barnacle-covered buttons. But he's convinced they're ancient currency from a mermaid kingdom. Your aunt rolls her eyes so hard, you worry they'll get stuck. Still, she pockets one. Just in case. As the sky deepens into purples and blue, you find yourself stepping outside again. The stars blink awake one by one, quiet as dew. The same constellations as before, but somehow different. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's the crab. You wander toward the village well, if only to stretch your legs. There, you run into your friend, also just back from a seaside trek with their family. You exchange tales, compare burns and bruises, and laugh about your respective travel mishaps. Apparently, they tried to cook clams in a clay pot that cracked clean in two. Classic. You show them the painted shell you swiped and they counter with a tooth-shaped pebble. It bit me first, they say, completely serious. You trade, naturally. It's not a vacation until you exchange semi-cursed objects. A quiet scholarly debate weaves into your thoughts as you stroll. Historians still argue whether these kinds of community outings were strictly seasonal or had more spontaneous roots. Some evidence points to formalized summer pilgrimage patterns tied to ancestral rites, while others suggest more flexible, leisure-driven coastal escapes. Either way, the result feels the same, an echoing memory stitched with brine and sandals and sun. You return home just in time to help pack away the last of the seafood spoils. Your mother gives you a quick once-over, then presses a warm hand to your forehead. Still salty, she mutters. Good. Before sleep, you light the oil lamp and take a moment to sketch the trip on a scrap of paper. Nothing fancy. Just a few rough lines, waves, a hill, a crab with impressive eyebrows. You tuck it under your pillow, not to keep it safe, but to keep it close. Outside, the cicadas have started again. Their droning is less of a song now, more like a blanket. You slide beneath your quilt, legs sore, mind humming. Tomorrow, the fish will be salted. The nets will be mended. The stories will be retold, exaggerated just enough. And for now, for tonight, the sea is behind you, but the salt still lingers on your skin. You wake up with the kind of soreness that suggests you either carried a whole ox yesterday or danced wildly with hermit crabs. It's unclear which. Your legs ache, your arms feel slightly stretched, and your shoulders mutter quiet curses every time you move. A true vacation, ancient Korea style. The house is already buzzing. Your grandmother is shuffling around the courtyard, arranging strands of seaweed like she's composing a poem. Your father is boiling seawater to extract salt, one of those slow, meditative tasks that's 1/3 science, 2/3 stubbornness. And your younger sibling? They've taken Claw-Sang the crab hostage and are currently building him a fortress out of stones and twigs. Claw-Sang seems unimpressed but resigned to his fate. Your job today is preservation. Every seaborne morsel must be sorted, processed, and stored before it spoils. In other words, today, you become a pickling ninja. You start with the fish. Laid out like little scaly soldiers, the smaller ones go straight into the drying racks. A light brushing of salt, a patient sun, and in a few days, they'll crisp up into salty snacks or rehydrate into soup base. The larger fish are filleted and placed into earthen jars, layered with salt and slices of wild garlic. These will ferment over the coming weeks into jiotgol, a pungent delicacy beloved and feared in equal measure. A mainstream historical detail anchors this process. Fermenting fish products like jiotgol or CK weren't just about flavor, they were essential food preservation techniques for communities without ice or modern refrigeration. These salty, funky concoctions became dietary staples, particularly inland, where fresh seafood wasn't easily accessible. The pickling jar was basically your ancient Korean fridge, and it smelled accordingly. As you press down the fish layers with a wooden lid, your neighbor pops over with a gift, a bundle of bright green perilla leaves. For wrapping, she says, then lowers her voice like she's sharing a state secret. And to ward off pickling demons. You blink. Is that a real thing? She just winks and leaves. Thanks, Auntie Ghostbuster. Next up, the seaweed. Some strands go to drying racks, while others get chopped and tossed in vinegar, garlic, and sesame oil. You sample a few slivers and your tongue does a somersault. Tangy, slippery, and a little chewy, like sour spaghetti that graduated from sea school. Then there's the sea cucumbers. You forgot how strange they look, half cucumber, half alien. Your aunt insists on boiling them, slicing them into coins, and soaking them in plum wine. Good for stamina, she says, which is ancient auntie code for don't ask too many questions. And of course, there's that moment, every trip has one, where something unidentifiable emerges from a sack. This time, it's a blob of something gelatinous, mildly twitching. You poke it. It shivers. Your cousin yelps. Your grandmother calmly declares it edible. Historians still argue whether all the things eaten during these post-seaside days were truly traditional, or just the result of intense boredom and intense pickling enthusiasm. While the grown-ups fuss over drying temperatures and jar lids, you take a break and check on Clausan. He's adjusted to domestic life far too quickly and now lounges in a ceramic dish like an emperor. Your sibling has given him a throne and declared him Lord Crabbleton. You briefly consider building him a crab consort. But then you remember what happened to the last pair. Romance isn't always easy in the crustacean world. Back in the courtyard, your father gestures for help. He's bottling the extracted sea salt, glittering crystals that still carry the faintest hint of ocean. You funnel them into clay pots and seal them with wax paper and string. There's something sacred about it, like capturing the memory of waves in mineral form. As the sun climbs higher, so does the smell of fermentation. It's rich, powerful, and, if you're being generous, alive. The entire house now smells like a fish market that learned philosophy. Your cousin gags dramatically. Your grandmother rolls her eyes and tells them to fetch more garlic. You pause at the threshold of the storage room, where dozens of earthen jars line the shelves like sleepy sentries. Some are cracked. Others have names etched into their sides. These jars aren't just vessels, they're heirlooms. Each one contains meals, memories, even gossip. There's a jar from the year of the red tide, one from the eclipse festival, another from that time your uncle fell off a boat and claimed to have met a sea spirit. You lift one lid to check the contents. A sweet, almost fruity scent wafts out, fermented mussels and rice wine. You resist the urge to stick your finger in. Instead, you add your newly packed jars to the collection, arranging them by size like a row of edible nesting dolls. The quirky fact of the day? Some ancient Korean households believed certain jars had moods, fermenting better or worse depending on the person who opened them. So, your grandmother always assigned fermentation guardians. Guess what? Today, it's you. Congratulations, you're now spiritually responsible for a gallon of pickled mackerel. Don't let it fight with the squid jar. By late afternoon, the courtyard's a mosaic of drying racks, tangled ropes, and quietly gurgling jars. You sit for a moment under the shade of the persimmon tree, sipping barley tea. Your hands are sticky, your clothes are crusted in salt, and your feet are tingling from hours of standing. But there's a peace here, a rhythm to the preservation rituals. Everything has its place, its jar, its time. You've helped transform a chaotic beach day into a pantry of purpose. And as you sip, the wind carries in the sound of a nearby flute, someone's playing a slow melody from the hill above. The notes rise and fall like waves, pulling you towards sleep. You lie back, salt still under your nails, and close your eyes for just a moment. The jars hum beside you. The wind shifts. Even the crabs seem content. The next morning, you're woken by something unusual, silence. Not the gentle quiet of a sleeping house, but a full-on, eerie hush. No wood creaking, no chickens shrieking, no one arguing over who forgot to clean the fish guts off the chopping block. Just the hum of stillness, and the soft, faraway rush of waves, like the sea breathing beneath the hills. You tiptoe outside, half expecting a crab uprising, only to find your family gone. Well, not gone, they've already set out early for the nearby market. Your grandmother left a note carved into a piece of driftwood, because paper is for letters and cowards, telling you to catch up with them before noon. Don't forget the abalone necklace, she scrawled. You roll your eyes. Classic Gran. Today's mission, delivering goods to the Seaside market. Your family has a stall there, passed down from generations of women who could out-haggle a tiger and spot a rotten clam from 100 paces. So, you pack your satchel. Inside goes a bundle of dried seaweed, a clay jar of pickled sea cucumber slices, the stamina dish, of course, some sun-dried anchovies strung like garlands, and a few carved shells that your cousin insists are lucky. Then, you find the abalone necklace, strung together with sinew and polished to a mother-of-pearl shimmer. Your grandmother says it brings fortune in trade and fertility, depending on how it's worn. You don't ask which way is which. You sling the satchel over your shoulder and begin your walk, winding along the coastline trail. The path is dusty but familiar, lined with white stones and tiny wildflowers. Occasionally, you pass another traveler, most of them carrying bundles wrapped in hemp cloth or balancing baskets on their heads with terrifying precision. One old man carries a wooden cage filled with puffed-up pufferfish. Don't pet him, he mutters. You didn't plan to. Mainstream historical fact incoming. Seaside markets in ancient Korea were vibrant microcosms of trade, gossip, and cultural exchange. During the unified Silla and Goryeo periods, markets along the coast flourished, connecting inland farmers with coastal gatherers. Salt, fish, seaweed, pottery, and textiles all flowed through these spaces like a living bloodstream. Even foreign traders, especially Chinese and Japanese, pass through now and then, bartering silks or dyes for dried abalone or medicinal roots. By the time you reach the market, the buzz is already building. It's set up in a flattened clearing just above the beach, dotted with straw mats, makeshift awnings, and rows of low tables piled high with everything from sea chestnuts to charcoal-dried squid. You breathe in the aroma, brine, fermented garlic, roasted barley, and a confusing but not unpleasant hint of smoked frog. Your family stall is easy to spot. It's the only one with a faded red banner stitched with the characters "For Blessed Belly." Your grandmother is mid-bargain, holding up a dried skate fin like it's a sacred relic. Your aunt is counting coins with the casual speed of a card shark. Your younger sibling is trying to teach Clausang to high-five customers. That's going about as well as you'd expect. You unload your goods and they slot perfectly into the display. The seaweed gets puffed and fluffed like a wig. The anchovies are stacked like dominoes. And that abalone necklace? Your grandmother hangs it front and center, whispering, "Let it catch the eyes." And the wallets. Suddenly, a customer arrives, an inland merchant with a strange accent and a robe that probably cost more than your entire house. He squints at your sea cucumber jar. Is it spiced? You smile your most confident ancient seaside entrepreneur smile. With plum wine and mountain garlic. A recipe older than the emperor's shoes. He sniffs it, makes a face, and buys 3 jars. You have no idea what he'll do with them. Possibly use them to remove rust. As the morning stretches on, the stall bustles. You sell dried scallops to a priest, bartered seaweed for a carved horn comb, and even swap a single pickled oyster for a tiny glass marble brought by a foreign sailor. Your aunt whispers that the marble wards off toothaches. Historians still argue whether items like that were really believed to have healing powers, or if vendors were just exceptionally good at lying with a smile. Nearby, a group of street performers begins a slow drum rhythm, followed by 2 girls in red robes dancing with long silk scarves. Their feet barely touch the ground. You get pulled into the tempo, tapping your own rhythm on a jar lid as you work. A toddler tries to eat a dried anchovy and spits it out like it insulted her family. Your grandmother laughs so hard she cries. Then, the quirky detail of the day, a man approaches with a cart full of carved wooden masks, all stylized with bug eyes and crooked grins. He claims they scare away jealous sea spirits. Like your ex, he adds with a wink. He sells one to your grandmother, who promptly names it Dong Suk and straps it to the crab cage. Clausang now has a bouncer. You notice some vendors have woven umbrellas made from stitched reeds, shaped like giant mushrooms. Others trade gossip as fast as they trade goods, whispers of a red tide to the south, a giant jellyfish spotted near the reefs, and a woman who gave birth to twins shaped like sea urchins. You chalk that last one up to fermented kelp wine and too much imagination. By midday, the sun is beating down like an angry drum. The pace slows. Customers lounge in the shade, sipping barley drinks or nibbling roasted mussels. You slip behind the stall for a moment and take a swig from a leather flask. It's some kind of iced plum tea. Sweet. Cold. Possibly laced with minor wizardry. You rejoin the front just in time to spot a familiar face, the flute player from the hillside. He's here with a small basket of sand-polished stones, shaped like little hearts and stars. You trade him a handful of dried anchovies for one shaped like a crescent moon. It fits perfectly in your palm, smooth, cool, and whispering of waves. As the tide pulls in, the market begins to slowly dissolve. Vendors pack their goods, exchange last-minute deals, and wrangle unruly toddlers. Your family tallies the day's earnings, a decent haul. Enough for new jars. Maybe a bolt of fabric. Possibly even a trip to the next port town. We'll see, says your grandmother, patting the abalone necklace. As you start the walk home, your satchel is lighter, your feet heavier, and your mind filled with images, flying scarves, fermenting jars, gossiping merchants, and masked crabs. You glance back once at the market, already a little blurry with sea mist and distance. But you know you'll return. Because in ancient Korea, a seaside trip didn't end at the beach. It flowed onward, jarred and pickled, sung and bartered, masked and remembered. You wake the next morning with a sore shoulder from hauling jars and an odd dream still clinging to your mind, something about a squid wearing your grandmother's hanbok and demanding a refund. You shake it off, stretch, and notice the sound of gentle hammering from the courtyard. Your uncle is already up, of course, building something that resembles a small altar. Except instead of incense, he's decorating it with dried fish and crab shells. Tide offering, he mutters between hammer strikes, like that explains everything. It does. Sort of. In your village, traditions stretch back longer than anyone can track. Some are rooted in solid agricultural logic. Others might involve appeasing invisible sea dragons with offerings of the sea's bounty and maybe a riddle or two. Today, your family is preparing for such a ceremony, a community event held once or twice a season, depending on lunar signs, weather patterns, and whether the fish have been biting or staging a silent protest. The purpose? To give thanks to the sea. And also, just maybe, to stay on its good side. You're not taking chances. Not after you saw those jellyfish the size of wagon wheels last week. You're assigned 2 tasks, preparing a symbolic food tray and assembling the ceremonial garments. This is not the time for shortcuts. You head to the back kitchen where your aunt is drying fish cakes in the sun. Not those, she says, slapping your hand away from the snack pile. Use the ceremonial ones. The less edible they are, the more the spirits like them. So, you arrange a tray with geometric precision, a fan of dried pollock strips, a pyramid of pickled radish, 2 tiny bowls of black sesame, and a carved gourd filled with spring water. A sea snail shell crowns the tray. For listening, your aunt says cryptically. You don't ask what it's meant to hear. Meanwhile, the ceremonial garments are aired out. You lift one, a flowing, layered hanbok dyed in seafoam green with tiny silver fish embroidered along the hem. It smells faintly of cedar and salt. You drape it across your arm carefully and take it to your grandmother, who will lead the procession. Mainstream historical fact break. Ancient Korean coastal rituals, such as haesinj, sea god rituals, were common across fishing communities. These events often involved music, dance, offerings of food, and elaborate performances led by female shamans, or mudan. Their role was both spiritual and theatrical, mediators between the human world and the unseen forces believed to control nature's whims. You help your grandmother dress, tying the sash, smoothing the folds, and handing her the ritual staff carved with 3 spirals. One for the wind, one for the wave, and one for the waiting, she explains. Again, you don't ask what is waiting. It's always better not to know too much when dealing with spirits. You carry the offering tray while others fall in behind. Some villagers bang drums softly. Others carry lanterns shaped like jellyfish, squid, and clams. Kids throw petals made of dyed seaweed. It's festive, but respectful, like a beach party hosted by someone who may or may not smite you if you forget your manners. You march to a small rocky outcrop overlooking the bay. The tide is coming in, high and strong, waves slapping the rocks like they're owed money. The air tastes like copper and something older. Your grandmother stands tall, raises the staff, and begins a chant. It's not in any language you speak, probably ancient or entirely invented, but the rhythm is undeniable. Others join in with drums and bells. The offering tray is placed on a stone, and a cup of barley wine is poured over it. You try not to wince at the waste of good drink. Suddenly, a gust of wind catches the hem of the hanbok and tosses it like a sail. Everyone pauses. A sign. But of what? Historians still argue whether these ritual winds were interpreted based on direction, strength, or whether they knocked someone's hat off. You decide not to ask. A fringe detail. Now, one man nearby wears a crab claw necklace made from real, cracked shells. He claims it's been passed down for 10 generations and that it guarantees safety at sea. He also insists the necklace once pinched a ghost who tried to board his boat. You just nod and take a respectful step back. The ceremony concludes with a slow dance. Your grandmother's arms sweep like gull wings, and the younger women mirror her. You and your sibling play rhythm with clamshells, clicking in time. You think of how much effort goes into this for something unseen, and yet, somehow, it feels worth it. Whether or not the sea god is listening, you are. And so are your neighbors. That might be enough. After the ritual, the villagers descend to the beach. It's time for the celebratory feast, because nothing says thanks for not drowning us like grilled seafood and sweet rice cakes. You spread out a mat with your family. Everyone contributes something. Someone brought fermented skate, which smells like an ancient sock demon but tastes oddly electric. Another has fried kelp chips dusted with sea salt and powdered plum. Your sibling tries to bury a rice ball in the sand like a hermit crab hoarding snacks. You gently retrieve it before nature reclaims it. Nearby, kids play a game involving seashells, a stick, and way too many rules. A boy claims his shell is spirit-touched and therefore immune to disqualification. No one argues. No one wants to risk spirit-related loopholes. You lean back, chewing on a sesame-glazed anchovy, and watch the tide slowly reclaim the shore. The stone altar remains, picked clean by seagulls but still standing. You wonder if the sea god appreciated the snack. Or at least the presentation. Later, as the sun dips into the horizon like a lazy peach, the beach quiets. Fires are lit, casting long shadows. The drums return, this time softer, more hypnotic. Someone hums a tune older than names. And then you see it, a flicker of movement, out on the rocks. Maybe just a seal. Maybe a trick of light. Or maybe, just maybe, a spirit passing through, carrying your family's dried pollock tray into the deep, mysterious vault of the sea. You don't say anything. Just sip from your tea gourd and listen to the waves whisper secrets you were never meant to hear. The following day arrives draped in a fine mist, the kind that softens the world's edges and makes every sound feel like it's wrapped in cotton. You wake slowly, stretching beneath your quilt, blinking as the soft gray light slips past the window shutters. Outside, the village moves in a hush, no shouting merchants, no clattering carts. Just the rustle of leaves, the faint murmur of voices, and the constant, patient breath of the sea. Today is for winding down. There's no frantic packing, no bustling markets, no rituals or offerings. Just the slow, rhythmic return to daily life. But even so, the echoes of your seaside adventure still linger in the corners of your home. Dried seaweed curled in bamboo baskets, jars of fermenting shellfish quietly bubbling in storage, and sand. So much sand. You sweep it from the courtyard, the floor, even the folds of your bedding. It has a remarkable talent for hiding. Your grandmother sits cross-legged on the porch, repairing a torn net with fingers as quick as ever. You join her, tasked with untangling the lines of a smaller crab trap. It's meditative work. Not, loop, pull. Like braiding hair, but somehow itchier. As you work, she tells you a story. Not one of gods or battles this time, but something simpler. Of how, when she was a girl, her family made the same trip to the seaside. Of how she once lost a sandal to a mischievous octopus, or so she claims. How the market smelled the same, and how even back then, someone's uncle thought they could outsmart the tide. It's a story of rhythm, of patterns repeating, of how the sea stays constant even as generations ripple past. Historians still debate how much of these oral histories reflect factual events versus the inevitable embellishments of memory. Does it matter? Perhaps the heart of history is less about precise dates and more about the stories we choose to retell, the textures we preserve in words. You finish untangling the crab trap and set it aside, proud of the simple victory. Later, you help your aunt in the kitchen, slicing strips of dried squid for tonight's stew. She shows you how to cut them on the bias, so they look like smiling waves. The air fills with the mingled scents of soy, garlic, and the unmistakable tang of the ocean. You sneak a taste. It's salty, chewy, and perfect. A quirky bit slips in here. Your cousin bursts into the kitchen, clutching a large, perfectly round rock. He insists it's a fossilized sea dragon egg. Your aunt nods solemnly and tells him to put it in the pickling jar. It'll hatch into a new flavor. You suspect this is how half your family recipes were invented. The afternoon drifts by in soft currents. You take a slow walk through the village, noticing small signs of change. The neighbors' fishing nets hang heavier with fresh repairs. The potter down the lane is shaping new jars, humming a tune you heard at the beach. Even the children's games echo seaside themes. Two girls are racing tiny boats made from gourd halves, while a boy builds a fortress for his imaginary crab king. Everywhere you look, the sea has left its fingerprints. You wander down to the stream where women are washing clothes. One of them is beating a robe against the rocks, cursing the stubborn beach smell clinging to the fabric. You offer a suggestion, maybe add mugwort to the rinse. She laughs. Or maybe we just accept we're part sea creature now. You sit by the water's edge, watching as your reflection shivers in the current. The person looking back is a little browner, a little more freckled, and carrying more stories than before. You trace a line in the mud, following the stream's path as it winds toward the distant bay. That evening, your family gathers for a final seaside-inspired meal. It's not grand, but it's honest. Seaweed soup, grilled mackerel, pickled radish, and bowls of barley rice. There's laughter as your sibling reenacts the tale of Lord Crabbleton, now upgraded to supreme ruler of tidal snacks. Your uncle brings out a dusty bottle of plum wine, pouring tiny cups that taste like sunlight filtered through old stories. A breeze flutters through the house, carrying the faintest hint of brine. You close your eyes and, for a moment, you're back on the beach, barefoot in the sand, kite in hand, sea spray on your lips. Before bed, you sit by the window, carving small patterns into a piece of driftwood you brought back. Not for trade, not for ceremony, just a memory made solid. You etch the simplest of designs, a wave, a fish, a small, grumpy crab. It's imperfect. But it's yours. As the village settles into sleep, you slip beneath your quilt, muscles still humming with the soft ache of work well done. You listen to the rustle of reeds, the distant lull of waves, the familiar creak of your home. Everything is quieter now. But fuller. Because a day at the seaside isn't something you visit and leave behind. It stays. In your jars. In your hands. In the stories you'll tell next time someone asks, "What did you bring back?" And maybe, just maybe, in the dreams of a small, exasperated crab named Clawsang. Morning again, but this time it feels different. It's the kind of morning where everything is back in its place, the chopping blocks are clean, the baskets stacked neatly, and even the air smells more like wood smoke than seawater. The village has quietly slid back into its everyday rhythm, but for you, the echoes of the seaside still ripple beneath the surface. Your final task today is simple, reflection. Not the grand, temple bell kind. More like putting things away slowly, deliberately, so the memories settle as gently as the sand you've spent days brushing from your shoes. You start with the gear. The crab traps, still faintly reeking of salt, are cleaned and stacked. The dried fish are bundled into straw packages, tied with loops of reed. You untangle the nets for what feels like the 100th time, fingers moving on muscle memory alone. It's a task older than you, older than your family, older than most of the houses in this village. There's comfort in that. Your grandmother sits nearby, mending a tear in a fishing cloak. The sea gives, the sea takes, she murmurs, threading her needle. But it always leaves you with something, even if it's just sand in your ears. You laugh softly. She's not wrong. Your ears are practically tiny seashells by now. Midway through the morning, your cousin ambushes you with a triumphant grin. He's brought you a farewell gift from the beach, a string of beads made from polished snail shells and driftwood chips. It's lopsided. The knots are uneven. It's perfect. You tie it around your wrist, and it clinks with every move, a soft reminder of tidal pools and crooked crab palaces. There's an unspoken understanding that today's pace is meant to be slow. The village feels it too. People linger over their work, pausing to share small stories, small jokes. No one's in a rush. Even the oxen plod more lazily than usual, as if they too are savoring the lingering salt in the air. A traveling monk passes through, his staff clicking softly against the stone path. He stops at your gate, offers a bow, and accepts a small bundle of dried seaweed in exchange for a blessing. His words are quiet, almost a whisper, "May your nets be full and your dreams light." You wonder if he says that everywhere, but it still feels like a secret gift. Historians still discuss the role of such itinerant monks in rural communities, not quite priests, not quite beggars, but carriers of news, stories, and quiet wisdom. You're grateful for his brief presence, like a tide that comes in just far enough to touch your toes. As the sun climbs, your mother calls you to help in the kitchen. She's preparing miyakguk, seaweed soup, thick and hearty. It's the kind of meal tied to birthdays, recoveries, and quiet returns. You stir the pot gently, watching as the dark green strands dance slowly in the broth, remembering the waves from just days ago. Over lunch, the conversation is simple, meandering. You talk about the next planting season, about the cracked pot that needs mending, about the neighbor's new goat that keeps escaping. But every now and then, a seaside memory slips in, a joke about the market, a sigh over the sunburn, a chuckle about Clawsang's royal crab ambitions. It feels right. Like the sea hasn't left, merely shifted its shape. After the meal, you step outside, satchel slung over your shoulder. One last task, walking the ridge above the village. It's not far, but it gives you a view of the bay, the fields, the winding paths leading home. You can see the thin line of beach in the distance, a faint shimmer where land meets water. You sit on a flat rock, pull out your knife, and whittle at a piece of driftwood. Not to carve anything fancy. Just to feel the wood give beneath your hands, the way the tide gives to the shore. Slowly. Steadily. Your cousin joins you, flopping onto the grass with the grace of a dropped bundle. He points at the bay. Next time, he says, we should build a bigger crab fortress. You nod. Next time. Of course. You both sit in companionable silence for a while, watching the clouds drift. You trace shapes in the sky. One looks suspiciously like your uncle's face after too much plum wine. Another could be a crab. Or maybe you're just seeing what you want to see. The breeze picks up, soft and cool, carrying with it the faintest tang of salt. You breathe it in. Let it fill you. As you rise to head back, you feel the gentle clink of the snail shell bracelet on your wrist. A small, imperfect souvenir of a perfect, imperfect journey. Because that's what these seaside days are, really. They're not grand stories for the court scribes. They're lived in the sand between your toes, in the smoky tang of grilled fish, In the echo of waves you can still hear when you close your eyes. You walk back down the path, footsteps light, heart a little heavier in the best possible way. At the gate, your grandmother is waiting. She doesn't say anything, just smiles. It's enough. Now, as the village quiets once more and evening folds itself gently over the rooftops, you settle beneath your quilt, the day's salt and sun still lingering on your skin. The house creaks softly with the memory of waves. Somewhere, a pot of seaweed soup cools on the stove. The wind hums through the bamboo grove, slow and breathy, like the sea whispering lullabies to the hills. You let your breathing slow, matching the gentle rhythm of the tide in your mind. In and out. Soft as the sand slipping between your fingers. Easy as the sway of kelp in a shallow pool. The images drift by, your cousin's triumphant grin, the lopsided shell bracelet, Clawsang's unimpressed crab face, the taste of plum-laced sea cucumber. Each one a pebble placed carefully on the shore of your thoughts, grounding you in the quiet simplicity of the day. The sea feels far away now, but its song remains. A memory that will ebb and flow with you, as steady as breath, as certain as the next tide. Your eyelids grow heavy. The world softens. For now, there is nothing left to do but rest. Let the story settle, like sand beneath calm waters. Let your body float in that perfect, timeless space between wakefulness and dreams. The sea will wait. The village will wait. And you? You're right where you need to be. Good night.